Alright, so we're going to be checking out the first short. I've actually fast-forwarded up to the point where I actually started because I started a video and then I started coughing and then, basically my hand hit a button. And the button I'm trying to find, usually at the end of every video I do that I can't never seem to find, I found it automatically. I don't understand that. But in any case, this is Red Eyes, Revelations, and Bucket. Now, as far as there has been a lot of talk about the Q&A sessions after the episodes. If you guys want to see that, basically put your comments in this video, because this is the one I'm going to be coming back to check this. And if there's a particular episode that has a fair amount of upvotes to the comment, just scroll down, check the comments, see if what you want to see has been requested, and then upvote it. And if it gets a certain amount of upvotes, I'll take a look at it if I've already watched that episode or if I hit that episode. In any case, yeah, here we go. Red Eyes, Revelations, and Bucket. And Bucket is an awesome name for a clone trooper. Also, to a commenter in my last video, who I will forevermore call Creamy Sheev. Do not worry, Creamy Sheev. I'm not abandoning the series anytime soon. Here we go.
Come on, Doc. It's getting late. I'm not sure I've ever had a field watch that lasted as long as whatever you're doing right now, the Clone Guardian groaned. He lightly dinged his helmeted head against the metal cover over one of the many arrayed supercomputing ports that were lined up, going out for miles in either direction. They were stacked in rows, with hallway space between them for engineers and technicians to access them. Dr. Sheena ignored Bucket, working from her chair, which she had parked nearly within one of the maintenance alcoves. Doc, I'm starving over here. Can you at least explain to me what you've been doing for the last, 12 hours? I'm not used to being around someone not talking to them, Bucket whined. Sheena took a deep breath, first in and then slowly out. Though her fingers did not cease their tapping, and her eyes, bloodshot and intense, did not blink. Before her were data streams and hollow access points, each laid out and scrolling past at simultaneous interludes which she had set. 8 of her digital proxies were maneuvering within the system, operating at various levels, and all at her direction. Currently, all of them were occupied, each one engaging with the security system of the Senate's communications record cache in one way or another.
I've been trying to slice into the Supreme Chancellor's private communications history,
she murmured, dry eyes darting. Bucket slumped at the news and shook his head. Why? Don't you work for the Chancellor? He asked.
We all work for the Supreme Chancellor,
the doctor said, dismissing the comment with barely a thought. Bucket crossed his arms and shook his head more vehemently. I mean, you work with the Supreme Chancellor directly, right? Can't you just ask him to let you see? He suggested. She'd almost paused and found herself laughing. It was the first time she'd laughed in days. But the laughter was not of a genuine sort.
It's because I work with him that I know that would never work. Sure, he will placate me, maybe show me something he wants me to see, but if it's something he doesn't want people to know, then I won't see it. At best, I'll be deceived. At worst, well, he'll know I know something about something he doesn't want me to know, and I'd rather not make an open enemy of my employer, much less the Supreme Chancellor.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Bucket tilted his head. And the way you are choosing to not make an enemy of the Supreme Chancellor is by illegally slicing into his holo records, he asked. Sheena nodded.
More or less,
she said.
Typically, something like this would cause an issue of trust.
But then why even bother? If he finds out you did this, you'll be his enemy no matter what you find, even if you find nothing, Bucket said. Dr. Sheena nodded and licked some sweat off of her upper lip. She knew that. Of course she knew that. Her heart was beating so fast, and had been for all of these 12 hours. She felt exhausted, but nothing she felt now could compare to what she'd felt back on the Honor Hound. Nothing could scare as much as that thing she had seen. That thing that had killed Renfi, killed Gaffin, and everyone else on that ship. That thing had not been human. She was sure of it. had been too large, too powerful. Its eyes still blazed, still watched her from her memory, burning, kindling, judging. Its last words whispered to her in her dreams, in her idle moments, in the maw of silence.
Angel of death.
Yeah.
I have come to render judgment.
The natural question then, of course, was, for what?
Living.
Judgment about what?
Living.
What was it judging, and why?
Your life.
Why had it judged them all worthy of death? But she had that answer already, yet... well, she knew what...
Okay, so I'm going to take a second and explain something real quick. For people that are looking at this picture in Star Wars and wondering what kind of weapon that is that the Space Marine is holding. Okay, so Space Marines have a variety of melee weapons. One of the most common is something called the chainsword, which is what he has. Now, the other times that he has narrated Jedi fighting Space Marines, the Space Marines that the Jedi are fighting, especially in the case of Anakin, when he fought the Space Marine in the hallway, they were using something called a power weapon. Now, a power weapon is a masterfully crafted sword that is essentially powered by an energy source, and this energy source can vary by the weapon. It provides a field to the weapon that pretty much acts in much the same way that a lightsaber would. The lightsaber is nothing more than focused energy. A power sword, on the other hand, is focused energy wrapped around a weapon in and of itself. If it were to lose that energy field, it would be susceptible to being cut through by a lightsaber. In some cases, not all. But the weapon that this Space Marine right there is holding is called a chainsword. Now, if you want to, think of what a chainsword is, the simplest explanation is best. It is a chainsaw in the shape of a sword that works in pretty much the same fashion. The teeth on this are honed down to, in many cases, a monomolecular edge, which means they cut through literally anything. Now, the good thing about it is the motion of the sword helps the Space Marine out, because even with the sheer amount of endurance and brute strength that they have, this chainsword allows them to do a lot more. Under the same token, used enough without proper maintenance, the teeth start coming apart, because frankly, the same Space Marine that will cut through stormtroopers like this will also attack tanks with the same kind of weapon. But in that particular instance, it's more about brute strength than anything else.
Why? She did not know why.
You
Doc?
were alive.
Asked the clone bodyguard.
Bucket, do you remember what happened right before the battle? There was a situation. One of the enemy ships had come out of hyperspace right in front of the fleet and ahead of its own forces. It was a huge ship.
She said. Bucket nodded, the back of his helmet clinking against the casing he leaned against. Though she did not turn to watch him, fingers still in a frenzy, eyes still wide as she worked. "Oh, I remember," he said.
And then something happened. One of our ships broke ranks. Do you remember that?
She asked, her voice a breathless whisper, as though she feared she might be overheard. Bucket nodded again. Yeah, I remember that. Captain Kraken lost his mind and suicide rammed the enemy ship. We were almost part of the group sent to help evacuate the wreckage. If we'd been... well, then we would have been in trouble, he said.
Good. I'm glad you know that much. But do you know which ship Kraken used to do it?
She asked. The clone shrugged as he answered. Well, I guess it would be his ship. The Honor... Hound, he started to say, trailing off, already realizing that made no sense.
It wasn't.
She confirmed for him.
It was a new ship, a modified Venator called the Belajor, which was given over to Renfi just before the mission began. That ship was personally gifted to him by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine.
Well, that's odd, I guess, Bucket said.
Very much
Sheena
so.
nodded, tapping roughly against the glass keys of her chair-mounted console.
It gets odder. I was on the bridge when it all happened. Kraken was getting our commands, was hearing our transmissions, but he wasn't responding. He chose not to respond. It was like he just...
She started to say, struggling to find the words. Just following orders, Bucket muttered softly.
Exactly. I almost want to say he was in a trance, but if you've seen the holo, then you know how precise that jump needed to be to actually hit its target. Captain Kraken was lucid, and he was at the helm, and he used all his skill to cleave that huge ship right down the center,
said the doctor. And doing that... Fragging moons of frag! Doing that started this whole war in the process, Bucket said.
To be fair, to be completely fair, if they hadn't done that, the war would have only kicked off about maximum 7 minutes later.
Only realizing the implication of the act.
Yes, that's the part that's obvious.
But they don't know that.
But there's just one particular thing that does not add up. Even more than all of these other oddities. One thing that is pushing me to find out more, despite the obvious risk.
Sheena said. And what's that? Asked the clone.
All Republic hyperdrives have inhibitors built into them. Fail-safes that pull the ships out of hyperspace if a sufficient mass shadow is detected in the path of the vessel. These are hardwired, and undoing that safety takes time and equipment. Too much time, in fact.
Okay, so let me explain that. So the concept that she's talking about right now is called it was basically there is a failsafe in the device that prohibits ships jumping into a gravity well. And what a gravity well is any vessel, any planetary body, asteroid belts, or anything like that would be around that has a sufficient enough gravity field, which that ship most definitely would have had. It keeps ships from accidentally jumping into planets at the speed of light, which if you don't know what that would do, say goodbye to the planet, because essentially it would crack it. That's why I had such a huge disagreement with something that happened in The Last Jedi, where the Admiral literally just jumped a cruiser at light speed, and they ignored that part of everything. In any case, shutting up, moving on.
Bucket paused to consider her words, but shook his head after a while. I still don't get it. The doctor sighed, breathing out her annoyance and increasing the rate of her tapping fingers.
The Bellator was modified for fringe space exploration. Its modifications included non-standard changes to critical systems, the shields, the crew quarters, the life support systems, the navigation sensors, and...
she said, letting the last word hang in the air. Bucket fumbled with his thoughts for a moment before gasping as the answer struck him. The hyperdrive? He asked.
Precisely! The listed changes appear to make it seem safe enough, but I'm not convinced of that. Not after the Bellator succeeded in accurately throwing itself down the center of that Imperial starship.
Sheena said. Wait, so you think the Supreme Chancellor had already prepared that ship to be used as a suicide ram? Bucket asked, aghast at the very suggestion. Sheena did not answer. She only typed more. Bucket, however, continued. But if that were the case...
Now that's the thing. She would be the only one that really understood that, because most of the... I think she was one of very few survivors and the only probable witness to that actually lived through the battle. So this makes a lot of sense.
Then wouldn't the order to ram the ship have come from...
And now you know why I need to know. Maybe the ship had a ram feature that Captain Kraken abused, maybe he was drugged, or replaced by a separatist infiltrator, or got the order from somewhere else. But the simplest answer is often the correct one. And in this case,
Occam's
the
razor.
simplest explanation is...
Dr. Sheena said before trailing off. A silence started then, and the clone seemed to take his position as lookout much more seriously. Sheena's hovering chair was wired to a nearby console, and while this section of the Senate's labyrinthian technical and maintenance access spaces had been utterly deserted for all the hours that they had spent there thus far, suddenly, everything seemed much less safe than it had been before, at least to the clone. Doc? Bucket said.
Yes?
She asked. I'm no computer expert, but if you actually managed to break into there, won't there be some sign that you did this? I'm sure you cannot listen to the Supreme Chancellor's personal communications without leaving a footprint. Sheena smirked and nodded.
Well, I wouldn't phrase it quite like that, but yes, which is why I'm not trying to listen to anything.
She said. Then what are you even looking for? He asked.
Simple.
She said.
A timestamp.
What? He asked. She breathed heavily and prepared
Clever
herself for
girl.
another explanation.
If I can see if a message was sent and get a timestamp, then I can see if it was just sent before the ramming happened. It won't prove anything, not by itself, but...
But it will be way too convenient to be coincidence.
Right.
He finished for her. She nodded. But if you find out and the message was sent, then what next? Who do we tell about something like this? The Jedi? Bucket asked. Sheena almost laughed again.
The Jedi? No, they are either in on it themselves at some level, or, if they are not, they are bound to do something ridiculous. Can you imagine if the Jedi tried to arrest the Chancellor over this? If he really did orchestrate these events, then there is no telling what else he is capable of. He could tear the Republic apart, and it would be as easy as issuing Order 66 just before his arrest.
She said. Order 66? Asked Bucket. The doctor nodded her head as she continued her work.
It's one of the 150 contingency orders that were drafted at the onset of the Clone Wars. They are supposed to be just for show, but who knows what would happen if he actually issued them.
She said. So who do we tell if...
I did not know that that was public knowledge. I thought that that was known in certain circles, but I did not know that was public knowledge. Anyhow, moving on.
Not the Jedi. The Senate? Bucket asked.
Almost.
She said before one of her screens turned blue, and then all of them followed suit. Dr. Sheena pulled her hands away from the keys abruptly as a new data stream began to fill her view, and she blinked her bloodshot eyes for the first time in too long, wanting to be sure she was reading this correctly, wanting to avoid an error at all costs. Whoa! What was that? Bucket asked, leaning in towards the alcove.
I'm in.
Sheena whispered, eyes scanning frantically. And? Bucket asked, voice tight as he came to watch over her shoulder. Her hand snapped out, tapping a key, and the data stream froze. She lifted her finger to one line, tracing under the holographic script, feeling her heart beat harder and harder as she read it again and again.
There it is.
She said at last.
A private transmission sent from the office of the Chancellor to an unmarked vendor. Unmarked, but within the war theater we were operating within. The message was sent only a few minutes before the ram. Frag! Only seconds before Kraken broke the formation. It's all right there.
The doctor breathed. Oh, Scrog and Scrog! Bucket moaned. So what now? He asked. The words seemed to snap Dr. Sheena back to reality, and she reached for the keys again, starting the process of covering her tracks, minuscule though they were.
We need to get in contact with the leader of the Loyalist Committee.
She said. Who? Bail Organa? Why him? The clone asked.
No.
Said the Saurian doctor.
The real leader of the Loyalists. We need to speak with the only person in the Senate with the backing and backbone to even think about doing anything about this.
She said. Bucket shrugged his shoulders. And who's that? He asked.
Senator Padme Amidala.
Said Sheena.
And we need to speak with her before she leaves for Axum.
Okay, so this could create a huge problem going forward, as if they didn't have enough. Now, that was one of the things that really I did not like about the prequel trilogy. The second the Jedi literally showed up to arrest Palpatine, I was like, okay, this is going to go south stupidly fast. This is going to go south stupidly fast. In any case, oh man, I'm glad I watched this short. There are 2 more shorts coming up. We'll check them out, bit at a time. Until then, I'll catch you guys next time.